In exploring the reception of Old Norse myth, with so complicated and at times even uncomfortable a legacy, there is a need to balance creative ideation and pedagogy with the content and fabric of Old Norse myth for modern students who have gaming as the gateway introduction to these myths. Eddic poetry, literary sagas, and archaeological records in which the extant fragments remain yield a number of core ideas that appear with a particular occurrence in semiotics and themes that echo repeatedly across the mythic landscape. We shall turn to the myths and their gaming counterparts to explore brief examples of how these reception works both promote and misconstrue these myths when considering gaming as an engagement medium for modern students. Characterizations prominent amongst the Old Norse myth corpus as such are the gods themselves, beings that embody specific attributes, virtues, and vices, and none more beloved or perfect than Baldur, son of Odin and Frigg. In Snorri Sturluson's Gylfaginning and the Eddic poems Völuspá and Baldursdrauma, we learn of the immense love and regard Baldur was held in. Beautiful, bright, shining, said to be the wisest of the gods, the most beautifully spoken and most merciful, but also that none of Baldur's decisions are effective. Baldur's mother Frigg sought to avert Baldur's prophecy death. Despite being set in Lokasenna to know the Orlog, or destiny of all things, she nonetheless extracted promises from all creatures across the 9 worlds never to harm him, save the mistletoe, which seemed so young and innocent as to be unnecessary, though ultimately his death from the mistletoe was inescapable. 2018's God of War game sees the eponymous hero Kratos and his son Atreus in the ancient Norse realm of Midgard, putting Atreus' mother Laufey to the funeral pyre. Soon after, a belligerent, swaggering, and foul-mouthed scrapper emerges with threats, and the first of many bloody, brutal fights transpires between the player as Kratos and this tattooed, cursing ruffian, who is later revealed to be Baldur. Protected from harm from all things as far as he understands, Baldur is denied sensation and stimulation, and as such exalts the great injustice done to him by his overbearing and anxious matriarch from whom he is estranged. Baldur here is not the ideal youthful man, beautiful, pure of heart and adored by all, but instead swearing, violent, embittered and vengeful, even deranged, in his anger and vituperative scorn for his world, himself, and his mother, architect of his plight. While this characterization of Baldur stands in significant contrast to the established character in the mythic landscape, Baldur's characteristic lack of aptitude for making effective decisions plays out in God of War. The enmity and discord his continued preservation propagates compels him to ultimately try to kill his mother, but he is defeated and killed by Kratos and Atreus, revealed to be Loki Laufeyson, wielding mistletoe. The intergenerational bloodshed is averted, but stands as a thematic keynote reflecting the blood feuds of the Old Norse world, as seen in Jarl's saga, Hrafnkel Freyskodi saga, and many other of the Icelandic sagas, and the futile but ultimately human effort to strive against one's fated end. Frigg, despite her arcane knowledge, cannot save her son from his fate in the myths or in their reception. The road to Helheim, the realm of the dead. Frostbitten, the icy desolation is haunted by shades and memories that the characters in God of War are confronted by. Memories of past failures, former antagonists, and mocking reflections of their former selves. Another game explores this realm and the recriminatory torment of Shades and the Shadow Self in greater detail. Senua, a Pictish warrior suffering from a dark curse of psychosis, undertakes a journey to Hell to recover her lover's spirit in Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, published in 2017. As she makes her way through the realm of the dead, Senua is assailed by harrowing prophetic visions that torment her, her dark curse of malefactor that accompanies her, and seeks to thwart her efforts, and she must battle countless Draugr, Valtyr the god of illusions, the fire Jotun Surtr, and even Hell herself in her efforts to rescue her love. Senua fights against Hell and the influence of the dark curse that plagues her, realizing it is a manifestation of her repressed traumatic upbringing and the violence she has witnessed in her life. But even with the magic sword Gram, she is unable to overcome the darkness. Defeated, she finally accepts that she never can bring her lover back from the dead. And with this awakening, the visions of Hell and the underworld fade, and Senua finally banishes the dark curse, accepting her psychosis as a part of who she is. Now, the notion of fighting against an unyielding and inexorable fate is a central theme drawn from Old Norse mythology. As the Volva in Völuspá advises Odin, the great cataclysm of Ragnarok casts a shadow across all that the gods have done and will do. The great reckoning and ruin come to the established order of Odin and the Aesir. The journey to the underworld to acquire numinous knowledge, as with Senua's acquisition of knowledge of the self that engenders emotional equilibrium and psychological actualization, is another core theme of Old Norse myth. Odin regularly practices necromancy, raising Volvas from the dead to impart their wisdom, as seen in Völuspá and Baldursdrauma, and in Havamal undertakes his famous self-immolation upon Yggdrasil, somewhere between life and death, to gain knowledge of the runes. Even the Jotun Vafthrud, in a battle of wits with Odin in the Eddic poem Vafthrudnismal, states that his knowledge of the runes he can speak with truth because he has journeyed to hell below. With severed limbs and playing gods in Hellblade, Senua carries her lover's severed head as a vessel for his soul on her journey to Helheim. Now, this motif is echoed in God of War with Mimir's head, an integral interlocutor who accompanies Kratos and Atreus and regales them with history and wisdom of all the nine worlds, as well as offering witty rebukes and levity in an otherwise stoic and serious narrative experience. Unlike the cheeky Mimir, however, Senua's sacred head object remains silent, and she is instead guided by her memories of a former slave of the Norsemen, well versed in their legends, along with runestones the player can find along the way that unlock further pockets of lore. The role of severed heads as vessels of wisdom, memory, and learning is deeply rooted in Old Norse myth. Mimir the Wise is decapitated during a hostage feud between the Aesir and Vanir, as Snorri recounts it. And in Völuspá Sigurdrifamal, Odin has used his sorcery to restore life to Mimir's head, that he may consult with him and gain counsel. While Odin has learned spells including that of necromancy, the Pictish outsider Senua clearly is bereft of this capability. Mimir's severed head is perhaps the most significant example of the importance of severed limbs in Northern European mythic structures, though we see in Volundarkvidr how severed heads can be used as punitive gifts. And even the sky in Gildverginning is said to be made from Mimir's skull. Severed limbs feature not only as sacred objects for the transmission of wisdom and guidance to mythological actors, but can also be seen as an element of a broader theme in Old Norse myths regarding mortification, disability, and disfigurement, and how these intersect with concepts of prestige, social functions, and ultimately, fate. In 2020's Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the Viking protagonist Eva Varensdottir barely escapes a murderous raid on her village, in which her parents are butchered, and in her flight through the Norwegian wilderness, she is attacked by a large wolf, ever after carrying a twisted scar upon her throat, earning her the epithet of Wolf-Kissed. Eva, like Senua, also encounters prophetic visions. These visions encapsulate the same Wolfmore and severed hand elements as the myth of Tyr, placing his hand as guaranteed during the binding of Fenrir, as described in Gildverginning and Lokasenna, the underlying theme being that of betrayal. Tyr etymologically in Old Norse relates directly to war and the war god, and taken together with the epithet of Wolf-Kissed, we can see how reception pieces play upon a familiar concept of the power of a name in Old Norse mythic structures, and their prophetic nature, with the ever-looming menace of Fenrir and Ragnarok as allusion to the end of the Viking Age and their pagan ways, with the subsequent conversion to Christianity. During the course of the game, Eva's foster brother Jarl Sigurd comes to believe that he is a god incarnate, but during capture by an enemy is tortured and has his hand severed. Disillusioned at first by the apparent loss of godhood the injury implies, Sigurd is then betrayed by Eva, usurping his throne as Jarl. Sigurd nonetheless maintains his belief in his godhood and learns that he is a reincarnation of Tyr, that Eva is a reincarnation of Odin, and that the two must overcome their differences to defeat a reincarnation of Loki. This architecture can be seen to reflect the immediate conflict of Ragnarok between Odin, Tyr, and the Aesir against Loki and the Jotnar. It also illuminates an enduring theory that sees Tyr as either an earlier war god and Germanic principal deity usurped by Odin during the Vendel and migration periods, as discussed by Dumetzel, Simek, and others, or Ruud's recent theory postulating that Tyr is a late Viking Age deity recorded by Snorri and other Icelandic scribes in the post-conversion period. The final aspect to consider is the reincarnation of Eivor and Sigurd as Odin and Tyr respectively, a sort of inverted Norse transubstantiation. This aspect is suggestive of Snorri's euhemeristic etiology, with Odin and the Aesir as ancient kings that migrated into Scandinavia and later came to be worshipped as gods for their efforts, further outlined with Frey as the source of the Swedish Yngling dynasty at Uppsala in Snorri's Heimskringla. Modern scholarship also provides great insight into these elements, with recent work from Wellendorf exploring narratives of humans masquerading as divinities in works such as Ogmundatatr and Saxo's Gesta Danorum. However, there are also examples of the gods inhabiting humans, as in Grafaldardrapa, where the victory god himself is said to be in Harald Greifalda during a battle, as well as Odin's beloved berserkers in Hrolf Kraki's saga.